Hi, welcome to episode 5 of Bragging Rights, the first podcast dedicated to bringing you Warhammer Fantasy battle reports every week. This week I wanted to test out my Crossroads 2400 point list. The Crossroads GT is a GT that's run in New York every year, and this year is the first year I believe that it's been done at 2400 points, and it's also the first year that doesn't have a comp score, just because 8th is just so new. So I have a pretty hard demon list with me this week. I brought a lot of points denial. I brought a huge unit of Nurglings, which is 8 strong, and I'm hoping to bring them up even higher during the game because I brought the Nurgling Infestation upgrade on my Big Papa Poop. I had a big unit of Horrors too, which I'm using Nurgling models for, and that unit is just rock hard. 50 guys with a 4-up ward save are not going anywhere anytime soon. Plus they're level 4 with +1 to cast. They have a level 2 with them too to keep them with the warded up, and also he has Dispel Scroll and Lore of Death every spell, which is really great. My hard hitting units are my Great Unclean one, and then my unit of 20 bloodletters with a Khorne Herald. So they've got the hatred on the first turn, they have a plus d6 on the first charge, and they've got the actual Herald himself hitting really hard. He's got the banner of -2 leadership, which combos really well with Doom and Darkness on the level 2 Tzeentch caster. My only other units are 2 units of Furies and 2 units of Single Fiends, just used to take out war machines and do some character sniping, and in the late game try to get a lot of flanks and rear charges on things. This week I played against Keith, is it Bonneau?
Yeah.
Keith Bonneau, and I've known him for about a year now. We run into each other a lot at GTs and big tournaments. He's an established player in southern Massachusetts, and he was playing his 2400 point Skaven list, which would have been somewhere near maybe your Crossroads list. Were you playing Crossroads this year?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying a few different things. Matt also asked me to bring up my Catapult and Abomination because I made those guys back in February, and for Conflict. This is similar to the army I played that was in Tales of Battle when I played Larry, which was in their issue 6. I had a couple little changes. I don't have a Furnace this time just because it eats up such a huge percentage of your hero allocation, and yeah, it's pretty standard. I've got 2 big units of Clan Rats, or somewhat big. 30 I guess isn't that big anymore. I've got 2 little Doom Flayers, which I used the Rackham Goblin Hewers and put Stormvermin heads on them.
Oh, cool. I was wondering what those were.
Yeah. I decided to put the Giant Rat unit in right at the end. I kind of had like around 130 points left, and I was like, well, I could take a cannon, but I've been taking those all the time now because they're so good. So I was like, well, I'll try playing a little bit more of a Horde army today and see how it goes. So I had 4 units of Slaves as well, and then my big unit of Plague Monks with a Plague Priest and some Censer Bearers. I only had 1 unit of Gunrunners this time. Usually I play 2, but against demons they're just not as useful, but you know, it's kind of more of an all-comers list. So, and here we have my Abomination, which is the guy from the Bell with a giant sensor ball swinging around. I used the Scroll model as my Grey Seer. It's a Privateer Press Dire Troll Blitzer. I took the guy off the top and put Queek on top to be my Warlord on a Bonebreaker, and then my Plague Claw Catapult is actually a Lord of the Rings catapult with a corpse cart like basket, I guess, on it, with some of the guys from the Furnace pulling it back down. And then I have the BSB from the Island of Bloodshed. Actually, I think he's hiding behind the Abomination right now, but you can still see him there.
Well, there was another model that I asked Keith to bring. I was hoping he'd fit it into his list, but I'm not sure that it's really viable. It's the Vermin Lord, which you played at Conflict, right?
Yeah, I took him to Conflict, and I actually took him to the big show in July, and he did pretty well there too. Unfortunately, he's just tough 5 with a 5-up ward save, and it's just I mean, that model's enormous too, so everyone can see him everywhere on the table, so it's just really hard to justify 500 points. The other two is like he's kind of good in combat. He's also a level 4 wizard, but the Gracier's better and can take arcane items, and I can put in a warlord on a fellblade, and he's better in combat. And
yeah.
It costs around the same, and you get to split it up into
both.
2 characters.
Yeah.
So
I really like him for his cool factor, though. I think I'd be tempted to run him at local tournaments and maybe heavily comped environments.
yeah, that's usually what I've been trying to do. I've been more playing for Art Boys lately, so I haven't taken him out of the case for a while.
I bet. Well, for this game, we rolled up our spells, and it was really easy for me because I rolled a 1 on my Big Papa Poop, so he only got the miasma and nothing else. And my other guys had compulsory spells. I had the 4 offensive spells from the Tzeentch lore on my big horror block, and I had the entire lore of death on my level 2. And other than that, I was done with spells.
I rolled pretty well for my spells. My engineer was level 2. I usually take that just so I can better guarantee certain spells on Ruin. But he ended up with Crack's Call and Warp Lightning, which are both great spells. My Plague Priest got Vermintide, but that's just because I can't not make him a wizard, so he got a spell. And the Gracier got Scorch, Howling Warp Gale, the dreaded 13th spell, and Skitterleap. So, pretty solid selection of spells.
Yeah, and the cards we're using here we found online. They're pretty cool cards. I try to use spell cards every game just to kind of illustrate what we're casting and what's going on. So for the table, we're using the same old terrain we always did. We rolled up 9 pieces, and this week I have 1 extra hill that I don't usually run, actually, that was created by Naked Terrain, which is a company that sponsored this episode. So I unfortunately forgot to get a close-up picture of that hill, but you can see it there in the distance with the yellow grass on it. The rest of the terrain is all, standard Mystery Forest ×2, Mystery River, 4 hills, and obstacle in a building. And also mention that this episode is officially sponsored by Geary's HSA, who provided the blurry photography and the slurred speech throughout the rest of the report. So for deployments, I actually rolled and won the table side, so I took Lazy Man's side. And then on top of that, I had to deploy first, which I actually didn't want to do. I usually like my opponent to deploy first so I can play a little more reactive, which is how I prefer to play Warhammer and 40k actually. So I just placed my Fiends, non-committal, on the flanks.
And in response to that, I usually just place my slaves somewhere close to where I think my general is going to end up so that they can be on 10s to start the game. But, I usually put down 4 or 5 units and only have 200 points on the board.
Yeah, with this list I have 4 kind of bait deployments, and that's my 2 Fiends and my 2 Furies. So I put my Furies down with the Fiends, and in this game I'm kind of going for team effort with the 2 pairs. They're going to be hunter pairs to work together, the Fiends and the Furies, so I deployed as such.
Yeah, so I just try to use my slaves really to eventually get in the way of units I don't want to engage yet, and I try to set up my giant rats over on the far flank to hopefully come around and be able to join the battle later.
Well, it wasn't too long after that I was done deployment. I debated putting my horrors into that building, but then realized when I exited the building I wouldn't be able to stay in my formation, which is 5 by 10. Because that would move me more than my maximum movement. So I deployed just to the left of it with my horse and just to the right of it with my bloodletters, and put my characters obviously where they were going to go, and put Big Papa Poop on the far left, thinking that I was going to have my Nurglings pop up also on that left flank.
So what I was thinking here, my catapult's pretty huge, so I could generally see the whole table, so I just put it in the middle. I got my clan rats and weapon teams down kind of centrally, figuring I could kind of react to what he was doing. I was really hoping that Matt was going to somehow try to put his horror unit in the building so I could try and hit it with Crack's Call and kill half of his models, but unfortunately he did not.
Every model takes an initiative check or gets removed or
no saves.
takes a wound.
No saves. So I want to
Okay.
hopefully get your Herald and knock your level 4 wizard into a level 2, but...
Yeah, it would have been a pretty big first turn for you, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
So, your character loadout, where are your characters going?
Well, my Gracier and my BSB end up in the clan rat unit closest to us right here, just to provide leadership and rerolls. My Fellblade General and the Radover goes in the other clan rat unit, who goes opposite your Great Unclean one, because I'd like to hopefully engage him. Thinking I can take him out pretty reliably with the Fellblade. And being on the Bonebreaker, because I know you don't have cannons, and gives me an extra wound, so hopefully I don't kill myself with the Fellblade before I get to you. My Engineer also ended up going on that side, since you didn't deploy in the building, so that I could maybe try and crack skull your Great Unclean one also.
Yeah, 1/3 chance of destroying him completely, which is pretty huge. It's a risk that I can't take. Anytime I see that spell, I have to get rid of it. For the scout deployments, he put down his first and put down the, what are they called, gutter runners?
Oh yeah, the gutter runners with the slings and poison, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I was worried that they might put a lucky wound or two on my Great Unclean one, and in retrospect, I probably should have been a little more worried about my Fiend getting wounds put on him. Anyways, I put my Nurglings down facing them, which prevented a first turn charge. What I should have done is just put them in my own deployment zone and been able to take that first turn charge against them. I just wasn't thinking. Oh well. When we rolled to see who went first, luckily I was able to get it. So I moved my Fiend around the gutter runners to try to force them into a situation where either they move around kind of uselessly or they get charged. And in retrospect, I probably should have moved my Fiend a little more intelligently to make sure that they stayed in my arc. The rest of my stuff just shuffled forward. My horrors went forward and just tapped that forest to see what it was, and it was terrible. Blood Forest, I believe it's called.
Anytime a unit in it casts, or is targeted by a spell that's successfully cast, they take, I think it's an extra d6, strength 4 hits, and then the forest gets up and runs around. So.
Yeah, it's pretty bad news on your horror block. And I've never seen this result before, so I was pretty excited, but we never got to use a special ability for this turn because I was too afraid. I just moved right out. After that, we moved on to the magic phase because everything else just kind of did the obligatory shuffle forward. I got off Doom and Darkness on his big unit, and we'll mention now that for the first 2 turns we thought that Doom and Darkness was a remains in play spell, and we played it as such. So
we're not big readers.
Yeah, so. Rules, fuck 'em. Drink and play Warhammer.
That should be the slogan for 8th edition.
Yeah, drink and play Warhammer. Well, roll dice as well.
Yeah.
Other than that, you've got everything covered. So I passed the turn.
Yeah, so I just kind of moved everybody up. My sensor bearers, who ended up being deployed terribly. I was forgetting how long their threat range is now, and having to take a leadership check on a 5 because they weren't anywhere near my general means that he was going to be able to bait me pretty easily. In fact, I think I moved myself into bait range. Didn't even really have to move. But everything else kind of moved up to try and threaten flanks here and there. A really good thing was that my gutter runners ended up passing their march block check, which allowed them to move completely behind the Fiend to shoot him later. My Abomination, as you can see there, my Abomination, I've actually rolled triple 1s for his movement, so he didn't go very far. But on his misfire result, I actually rolled fuel injected, which I'd never gotten before either. So
fuel injected.
So it became strength 7 and shuffled up his 3 inches and kind of hung out behind the wall.
Whatever happened to misfire is blowing things up when you get triple 1s. That's what I want to know.
Yeah. So I moved my slaves up in the way and kind of moved my plague monks up to threaten the flank, and scuffled some of my units around to kind of jam up in front of all his stuff.
Yeah, it was basically just a lot of slaves moving up and jamming up the works.